Jay, we're so happy to have you here. And I know you and Richard have met and connected and had some great times together before. So I'll leave you in a moment to have a wonderful conversation on this theme for this evening, peace and purpose, two vitally important topics and such a hopefully a close link to your amazing work, Jay. We're honoured to have you with us. And just for the audience sake, as always, folks, please feel free to join in the chat. I know Jay is looking forward to hearing your feedback. And also, please feel free to pose questions in the Q&A. We're going to use some of those live during the session. And so I'll come back a bit later on and bring in some of those questions. But all that remains for me to do is to say really warm welcome to all the audience, wherever you are around the world. Massive thanks to Jay for being here. And Richard, thank you for hosting the conversation this evening and for all you're both doing to help create a happier and kinder world. It really is inspiring to be with you both this evening. And Richard, over to you.
Well, Jay, lovely to see you again. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. I've just come back from holiday, and guess what I've been reading? This is what I've been reading. And actually, it's the first time I saw the new hairstyle. I like it. So it was actually quite an inspiring experience reading this book. It's full of wisdom, but it's also very practical because it's about what you can do day by day to transform your lives and all of our lives for the better. So I strongly recommend this book. Now, the subtitle is Train Your Mind for Peace and Purpose Every Day. So peace and purpose. Peace is the inner state of mind, the serenity that we would all love to experience. Purpose, of course, is how we relate to other people and our role in the world. So let me start, if I can, by asking you a bit about peace, because people are having some trouble with their inner life during this COVID period, and especially during the lockdown. And I guess in a way, being in a lockdown is not so different from being in a monastery. You're cut off from some of the people you'd like to be seeing, and you may be seeing too much of some people you wouldn't like to see so much of. So I'm sure the wisdom that applies to life in a monastery also applies to life under COVID. Now, people have been having real difficulties. We all know the statistics, increases in mental illness, especially among young people. So, Jay, could we start? What's your message to people who are struggling in their minds to maintain the equilibrium and serenity that they would like?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to say a big thank you to Action for Happiness, to Richard, to Mark, for allowing me to have this opportunity. I'm so grateful to be with all of you, and I can love the fact that I'm seeing people from Australia, Dallas, Texas, Salford, Enfield, very close to where I grew up, Bristol. It's so wonderful to see so many amazing people chatting away on the Zoom chat. So thank you all for being here as well. A big welcome to each and every single one of you. And when I talk about peace and purpose, or when I talk about people today feeling a lack of it, the first thing I want to mention is that we're living at a time where we're all experiencing extreme challenges. So if you're not feeling peace right now, if you're not feeling calm right now, if you're not feeling happy right now, that's fine. That's okay. And I think it's almost the pressure sometimes to feel these things all the time is what creates such a distance of them from us. And so my first thing would be is recognizing that we're in a very challenging time. It's an unprecedented time. We've heard that a million times, but it is. And therefore you can't be equipped to know how to deal with it. And so if you are feeling stress or pressure, that's fine. That's okay. It's a part of it. And actually what that should do is that should encourage us to say, well, let me discover what are the tools, what are the techniques, what are the practices that I can do to make sure that I come out of this stronger. That's what should happen. Instead of trying to just get rid of the pain that we're feeling right now, we can recognize that this is a moment for us to develop those muscles and develop those habits. The second thing I'd say for anyone who's going through a challenge is there are multiple things you can do in your day immediately that will have a huge impact on your mood and your state of mind. And I want to share these three things with everyone. They come in the form of the 3 S's, which I speak about in my book, Think Like a Monk, that Richard kindly just shared with everyone. And these are sights, sense, and sounds, what we see, what we hear, and what we smell. What we don't realize is that what we see, what we hear, and what we smell can transform the way we feel. So here's a big question for you. What's the first thing that you see when you wake up in the morning? Now, studies show that 80% of us see our phone first thing in the morning and last thing at night before we see our partner in the morning. And the last thing we see at night after our partner is our phones. So when you're starting your day with your phone, you're really taking a pill for anxiety in the morning, because you're now reacting to everyone else's agenda. You're reacting to everyone else's emotions and feelings. And so I always say to people, pick something that you want to see in the morning that brings you that serenity, that brings you that sense of calm and happiness and stillness that you want to experience. It could be a painting, it could be a quote, it could be a picture, it could be anything you like, but make sure that you intentionally choose what's the first thing you see in the morning. The second thing is sounds. Now, a lot of us throughout the day will listen to a lot of irrelevant sounds. This could be a TV in the background that we're not really paying attention to. It could be construction work. It could be drilling. It could be negative white noise that's just there in the background. But it's so important to sound design your life. Now, how many times have you had it where you hear a song and it makes you happy? It makes you want to dance. It makes you want to laugh. It's so important to sound design our lives. What I mean by that is when you walk into your living room, what are you listening to? When you walk into your bedroom, what are you listening to? Create a soundtrack for your life that gives you calm when you need it and gives you joy when you need it. Having a playlist like that can just change your day. And the third and final thing is your scent. Why is it that every time you walk into a spa or a massage therapy place, you feel calm? Because guess what? They probably have a scent of eucalyptus, lavender, or sandalwood. Now you can get essential oils, you can light a candle, you can get a diffuser for your home, and just breathe in that scent. And those are 3 great ways to start feeling more peace and tranquility every day without having to change too much.
Great. Well, thank you. Jay, I think everybody who knows about you is fascinated by your life story. You grew up in northwest London. You went to college, but you met the monk in your first year in college. And then as soon as you left college, when everybody else from your course went into the city of London, you went into the monastery. Just an extraordinary, extraordinary insight that you had. But after 3 years, your teacher said that he thought you should go back into the outside world. Quite a shock, I would have thought. A bit like becoming unemployed in COVID. Do tell us how you coped with this.
Yeah, absolutely. It was probably one of my toughest points in life. So when you go off to become a monk, you not only give up your family, friends, you give up your job too. And so you lose a lot. And when I say give up, it doesn't mean I never talk to my parents. What I mean by that is you're giving up a normal life. And so it's almost like the greatest act of rebellion is becoming a monk, because you're not going down the perceived normal path. And so for me, people were saying, will you ever make money again? Will you get a job again? Will you ever be able to survive again if you come back to the real world? And I thought I was going to be a monk forever. So when I knew I had to come back, it was actually one of the lowest points in my life. I experienced what I feel the closest I ever have to depression. I felt very stressed. My parents were not well off, so I didn't know what I was going to do to survive. And I came back to all the noise of like, look, you came back in 3 years. You're never going to get a job. You're never going to make it. What are you going to do now? And all of my friends were now in relationships or buying homes or successful in their jobs. And I was 25 going on 26. And I was in $25,000 worth of debt, about 18,000 pounds worth of debt from my student loan. And I didn't really know where I was going. And so for me, that was one of the lowest points I've been at in my life. But what I realized was that what I had learned as a monk was really powerful to transform my perception and continue to find the next steps. And that's really what I realized, that my monk life for 3 years was like going to school. And the last 7 years have been like the exam. And so what I started to do over the last 7 years since I left the monastery is I started to apply these principles that I learned into my life. And I saw that they worked. And that's why I wrote the book, because I wanted to show you all that they work. And so for me, the biggest thing to do at that time was to really appreciate what I could learn from the silence and the stillness. We often think that we can't learn anything when we're alone, but there's a beautiful word for being alone. It's called solitude, which Paul Tillich and the wisdom texts of Buddhism and ancient teachings will suggest that loneliness is actually solitude. It's strength. There's courage in that loneliness. It's solitude. It's not loneliness. And so sometimes being forced to spend time with ourselves is a great way of finding ourselves without having all of that noise.
Well, you did very well. Your recovery was extraordinary. And in 4 years, you've got to a position where you're teaching 40 million people on your Facebook, which is just completely extraordinary what you've done. I think you have found your Dharma, as they say. In fact, I know a 60-year-old woman therapist who listens to you every morning in London. Which I found very, very impressive. But of course, most of your audience are a bit younger than that. And that's good, because these are the people who are struggling most. And as we know, even before the COVID, the mental health increase in mental illness was mainly occurring amongst people in their teens and 20s. And those are the people who, well, they are the population of the future, and they're subject to incredible pressures. They're subject to exam pressures, and they're subject to pressures from social media, building their image, all of that. So I would love to know what your special message is to young people. How can they find a better balance of objectives and a better purpose in life?
Yeah, I think this applies to everyone, but definitely to answer your question, Richard, around younger audiences and generations, I really believe that building up a strong daily routine and a daily foundation is so core to having a meaningful life. We think that finding meaning and happiness and purpose are these big things, but when you just narrow it down to these basic, simple habits that everyone can do every day. So I want to share with you 4 habits that I talk about in Think Like a Monk, and they're in the acronym TIME, so T-I-M-E. So this is what I call the ideal morning routine, and this is the morning routine of monks. It's also the morning routine across traditions, and this morning routine is something that if you do this every single day, whether you do in the morning or throughout the day, if you do this every single day, 5 minutes of each of these activities, it will boost your mood and transform how you feel. And when you simplify it to that and you realize, oh, I just need to check off these 4 things, you start to see real change. So the first thing is T, which stands for thankfulness. Having thankfulness and gratitude in our day should be a daily habit. Now, being thankful isn't just about thinking about it and feeling about it, it's being thankful. If you express thanks to someone, if you express gratitude to someone, guess what happens? You connect with that person, it deepens your relationship, it boosts your mood, it makes you feel good, it makes you feel loved and cared for because there's people in your life to be grateful to, and so much changes. Now, the thing about that I'd say is always be specific in your gratitude. So Richard, let's say we do this and you get 2 messages and one of the people message you and say, Richard, thank you for doing that. That was wonderful. And let's say someone else messages you and they say, Richard, this was incredible. I love the insight about this. Thank you for doing what you do. Action for Happiness is amazing. I really appreciate how you did this. And they go into so much detail. The interesting thing that research shows is that when we're grateful, we feel more happiness and joy when we're more specific, and the person receiving our gratitude feels more happiness and joy when we're specific. So it's really important to be specific about what we're grateful for. That's the T. The I stands for inspiration or insight. Every single day we need to be reading, hearing, or exposing ourselves to some inspiration and insight. Could be in the form of listening to a 10-minute podcast, showing up for something like this, reading just a paragraph of a book, or reading your favorite quote every day. For me, at one point, I used to listen to Steve Jobs' commencement speech at Stanford University every single day, where I nearly knew it all off by heart. And simply listening to that every day, because it was so inspirational, it would always boost me. It would always give my mind something to focus on. And the goal is to find insight that you can apply in your life. So you may take one quote a week and say, I'm going to try and live this principle. You may take a value or a quality and say, I'm going to try and live this quality, like kindness or empathy. That's the I, and we can keep that every day. The M stands for meditation. Now, I'm a big fan of meditation. And in its simplest form, meditation just means spending time with yourself, just being with yourself. And so if that means just taking up 5 minutes a day to find out how you feel, how your body and mind feel, it can be really powerful. And E stands for exercise. Now, if you can exercise for more than 5 minutes, that's amazing. Exercising, even for 5 minutes a day, if it's just a few jumping jacks, if it's a little dance party, whatever it is for you, movement is so good for the body and the mind. So you can remember that TIME, thankfulness, insight, meditation, and exercise. And if you do those 4 habits every day, you're going to set yourself up for so much success, so much happiness in your life.
Jay, one of the things you've done to make yourself happy is getting married.
Yeah.
Very, very, very lovely. But of course, for some people, family life is just wonderful. For some, it becomes sad. And there are, I would say that one of the main causes of unhappiness in Western society is family conflict, domestic violence, psychological or physical. This is something, an everyday occurrence. And I think you have people coming to get your advice on these kind of issues. I'd love to know, what do you say to a couple who've fallen out of love? Do you have things to say to them about how they can regain their love?
Yeah, I think sometimes we never even fall in love in the first place. We just are infatuated, or we're attracted to someone. And so often it's never that we fell out of love, because to fall out of love means you should have fallen in love. And so there's a part of me that emotional and physical abuse is separate of this, because if someone is experiencing emotional or physical abuse, they need to find the right answer for themselves in what they're going through. And I don't think anyone should tolerate any sort of emotional or physical abuse in their relationship. And so that is a completely separate theme. But if someone is having just arguments and they're having disagreements and they feel they've fallen out of love, my recommendation would be that you really learn how to fight. Now, this was a research study that was done by the Gottman Institute, run by John and Julie Gottman, who are married. And they do a lot of relationship research. And they found that the number one skill, or the number one thing that kept people together in relationships, was not date nights. It wasn't watching a movie together. It wasn't going out for dinner. It was knowing how to fight. And most people don't know how to deal with conflict. So the thing I would ask yourself is, have you developed the skills of dealing with conflict? Because if you have, then you're more likely to be able to navigate these difficult situations. So as a couple, I would focus on getting better at listening to each other, understanding each other, and actually explaining how you feel, rather than just thinking that you just disagree. Because the truth is, in a marriage or in a relationship, you have 2 minds from 2 different backgrounds coming together. You are going to have conflict. So it's not about whether you will fight or you won't. It's about how you're going to fight.
Jay, let's come on to purpose. And I was really interested in the book, how you use what is a very old-fashioned word, service. In fact, I've been amazed when I've used that word with some of our young friends. They say, what's that? It's very interesting. It's a word that sort of drifted out of the language, that you're trying to bring it back in again. And I think that was a really important message I got from the book, that we have to get away from the culture where you're trying to get as much as you can, be it not just material accumulation, but grades, jobs, money, even desirable partner, but getting what you can get rather than what you can contribute, what you can give. This is why we founded Action for Happiness, to try and promote this kind of revolution in culture. And I think that's the same as what you're spreading through your 40 million followers. And it's a really, really important cultural revolution that we're trying to to bring about. But it's very difficult. We're a minority culture at the moment. And I would love to know your thoughts about how it can become more of a majority. Because one of the things that we have done, I mean, we have asked all our members when they sign up on the website to be members, to pledge that they will try to live so as to produce as much happiness in the world as possible and as little unhappiness, which is, I think, incredibly important and inspiring way of thinking about your purpose in life. But it's much easier said than done. And one of the things to make it easier is to get together with other like-minded people. I know you've been trying to do that with your followers, to get them into local groups worldwide. It's what we've been trying to do with our followers from when the Dalai Lama came and launched our Exploring What Matters course, and groups have formed from that. But it's still a minority. And I worry about how we're actually going to win this battle and change ourselves from the minority into the majority culture. And I think that organization is very important, because in the past, if you look at the history of culture in the past, every culture was embedded in some organization. Christianity was embedded in churches and so on. And I asked the Dalai Lama once, have you thought about setting up a worldwide organization to promote happiness and the culture of giving? And he said, well, that's not my role. And he was quite right. I mean, he's a head of state apart from anything else. But I think we are light on organizations. And I'd love to know your picture of how the world that you talk about in this book is actually going to become the majority culture rather than the minority.
Wonderful question and wonderful reflections, Richard. And you have such a bold and direct, clear vision of helping people find happiness, and it's really inspiring and beautiful to see. So thank you for what you shared just now. I really feel that first we have to help people understand what happiness and what purpose are. And to me, happiness is the result of living a purposeful, meaningful, and fulfilling life. So then the question is, well, then what is purpose? And to me, purpose is split up into three things. And so I'll give people an equation, which I'm actually going to type as well so people can see it. So this is the equation. Passion plus expertise plus compassion equals purpose. So this is known as Dharma in the Vedic tradition. It's known as, which means eternal purpose or eternal duty, or your psychophysical nature. In Japanese, I believe there's a word called ikigai, which means the reason for being. So the way I understand Dharma is passion plus expertise plus compassion equals purpose. Now, what that means is what we have to discover is not our purpose. What we have to discover is our passion, our expertise, and compassion, and how they come together. So our passion is something that brings us alive. And you may say, well, Jay, I don't know what my passion is. And so if you think of purpose as the adult, if you think of passion as the teenager, if you think of interest as the child, then curiosity is the womb. Right? Curiosity is the beginning of passion. So right now, you may not know what you're passionate about. You may not know what you love, but what you will find is your interest and curiosity. That's what you want to focus on. That's what you want to follow. That's what you want to engage with, is what are you curious about, and start there. So sometimes you'll find your passion through curiosity, and sometimes you'll find it through pain. Maybe you've gone through a challenge in your life that you never want someone to go through again. Maybe you've overcome a battle in your life that you don't want someone to have to do again. So now you're starting a charity or you're starting a business to help that. And so when we solve big problems with our passion, it becomes a really powerful opportunity. The second is expertise. Part of happiness is confidence. And part of being confident is being good at what you do. And for a lot of us, we don't get the opportunity, or we don't make the time to actually become really good at something, which becomes really satisfying. And that confidence helps us feel happy. So if you're a photographer, what more photography courses could you go on? If you're a cook, could you go on a culinary course? The wonderful thing is today you can do so much online as well. And so it's really important to get the expertise right. And finally, you have passion, expertise, and you have compassion. This is the service bit that Richard was speaking about. If you're not turning your passion into a service, it's not a purpose. I know so many people who have used their passion to become successful, but they're not happy because they have to learn how to use their passion in the service of others. And so that's the full process of purpose. And so how we become the majority, or what my vision is by helping people find their passion, their expertise, and their compassion. That can be the way that we can turn into the majority, because it has to be about the individual. We have to help the individual have what they want to give. And we can't give happiness if we don't have it. And we can only have it if we live a purposeful, meaningful, fulfilling life.
Jay, I think that's wonderful, wonderful wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, you when we talked about this yesterday, we thought it would be wonderful if you could lead us in a bit of a meditation at some point. And we thought perhaps this would be the point, because after this, Mark has been accumulating these thousands of questions, and he's going to somehow rather condense them into a tiny number. But would you, before that,
yes,
you said you were a fan of meditation, I know that well.
Absolutely.
Would you lead us in a short meditation? Thank you.
I would love to, Richard. Thank you for the opportunity. Absolutely. And Mark, I look forward to the question. So what I'm going to do in a moment is I'm going to play some music just so we can have some accompaniment background music, which will really help us redirect our mind. And what I would suggest to everyone is, whether you've meditated before or you haven't, don't try and recreate a feeling you have had, or don't try and empty your mind. Just follow what I'm guiding you through. So don't worry about anything you've done before this. Richard, I'm going to play the music, and all I want you to do is close your eyes and put up your thumbs when you can hear the music. So we can all close our eyes now. And for a second, I'm going to keep mine open so I can see if Richard can hear the music. And then we'll start. So Richard, just pop your thumbs up when you can hear the music. And everyone say yes in the comments. Close your eyes. Lower your gaze. And just find a physical space of calm, balance, and peace. Whenever your mind wanders, just gently and softly bring it back to calm, balance, ease, stillness, and peace. Become aware of how you breathe, feeling the air coming in through your nose and then out from between your lips. Breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth slightly open. Just becoming aware of your natural breathing pattern. Breathing in and out, feeling the air going through your nose and then out from between your lips, feeling that sensation. What I'd like you to do now is I want you to breathe in and I want you to roll your shoulders backwards and up, and breathe out and roll them back and down. Breathe in and roll your shoulders back and up. Breathe out and bring them back and down. Breathe in and roll your shoulders back and up. Breathe out and roll them back and down. And now breathe in and lower your left ear to your left shoulder as you breathe in. Breathe out and bring it back to the middle. Lower your right ear to your right shoulder as you breathe in. Breathe out and bring it back to the middle. Lower your left ear to your left shoulder as you breathe in. Breathe out and bring it back to the middle. Lower your right ear to your right shoulder as you breathe in. Breathe out and bring it back to the middle. And once more on each side, lower your left ear to your left shoulder as you breathe in. Breathe out and bring it back to the middle. Lower your right ear to your right shoulder as you breathe in. And breathe out and bring it back to the middle. Just aligning your body and your breath, creating a sense of alignment, feeling in harmony and in sync. And whenever your mind wanders, just gently and softly bring it back to your breathing pattern. Place your left palm on your stomach. And as you breathe in, feel your stomach come out. And as you breathe out, feel your stomach go in. As you breathe in, feel your stomach go out. And as you breathe out, feel your stomach go in. Try and breathe in for a count of 4 and breathe out for a count of more than 4. Breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4. And breathe out, 1, 2, 3, 4, and more. Do this a few times in your own pace at your own time. Breathing in for 4 and out for more than 4. Finding your own sense of calm and stillness. And when you're ready, in your own time, at your own pace, you can gently and softly open your eyes.
Thank you so much. It was beautiful.
Yeah, sorry about that. I dropped my laptop for a second while I was doing that. But for everyone else, I hope that was a useful, simple meditation, just with a bit of breath work. Let me know how that was in the comments. I love being able to see how people find it. I'm seeing a lot of wonderful. It was great, and found it very useful. So yeah, beautiful to see all your comments. Thank you so much, everyone. A lot of you saying very relaxing. What we did there, just to explain it, is we were aligning our body and our breath. So for most of us, our mind is ahead of our body, or our body is ahead of our mind. I'll explain what that feels like. When you wake up in the morning, your mind is racing ahead and your body just feels, I wish I was still in bed. Or you wake up in the morning and your body's running around and your mind goes, oh, I wish I was still in bed. So often we're feeling this lack of synchronicity between our body and our mind. So when we breathe in for the same amount of time as we breathe out, we're aligning our body and our mind. And so whenever you feel stressed, if you think about your life, we always say things like, I'm out of breath. I need to catch my breath. Let me take a breath. It's all of our emotions. When you experience pressure or stress or anxiety, it's always your breath. So when you learn to navigate and align your breath, then every emotion can be managed and navigated. That's why breathing is so powerful to do. So thank you, everyone. I'm seeing amazing comments, and I really appreciate you all taking part. We, just so everyone knows how long we were doing that for, you know, we meditated for about, let me tell you exactly how long we meditated for, because sometimes it's really interesting to know. We were meditating for roughly about, I believe, about 10 minutes, which is, you know, a significant amount of time. So, I mean, I'm going to send you I'm going to put the link to the music in the comments too, so that if you want to find that yourself, you can listen to it. I've just put the link.
Brilliant. Thank you. Now, Mark, tell us the most brilliant questions.
Thank you, Jay. That's been really, really inspiring, and I really enjoyed that meditation. So many questions, but they do all fit, I think, under these categories of peace and purpose in some ways. So starting on the peace, Richard raised that question of relationships, and I think you made a specific point about, obviously there were some really quite abusive relationships, and I thought we'd lean into a really difficult question straight away. Chris has said, how do we achieve tranquility if we live with post-traumatic stress following many years of psychological abuse? And I guess that's one very specific example, but of course, people have post-traumatic stress of a variety of different natures. So although there were these sort of general ideas that help us, of course, some people are dealing with really, really difficult situations. How can they find that peace, Jay?
Yeah, that, first of all, thank you so much for that, you know, very honest and vulnerable question. And I tend to, anything that is considered to be diagnosed medically, like PTSD or something similar, I always really believe that it could take, you know, it could take years of therapy, of support, of medical support. And I think a lot of these ideas I've shared today can supplement those things. I don't think that anyone has yet figured out how to really undo that work, or whether it needs undoing at all, or whether what it really needs is just healing in time. So my recommendation to anyone going through anything of that sort is to find and experiment with all opportunities of parts that we think could be useful, because sometimes we're only doing one thing that we can, but if we really want to work through something, it's really important that we try all alternative types of therapies that are of course legitimate, and try and experience what we can. And that's the best answer I can provide, because it's something that needs to be treated with so carefully and so specifically and so personally. There isn't a blanket answer to that. And so I would say that by seeing therapists, by seeing people in your area of expertise, by having people around you who are medically equipped to guide you and support you is probably the best way that I would suggest. But I'm open to Richard and Mark, of course, your wisdom in this area too, if you have a better recommendation. I think the other things I've said today and the items I share in the book are all things that can be complementary and supplementary to that very important step.
Yeah,
that's very wise, Jay. Thank you. Our next question, I'm delighted to say, is from a dear friend, Karen Guggenheim, who runs the World Happiness Summit. I'm sure you'll have come across Karen, Jay.
Yes.
More on the theme of purpose, really. Karen's asked, don't you think that systemic change is important too, beyond the individual way we can contribute? And I'm sure Richard will have views on this as well, with all the work Richard's done in this area. So what do you think about the system change we need to see in the world?
Yeah, I agree with that. I completely agree. And Karen, first of all, it's good to be speaking to you again. Thank you so much for all the amazing work you do with the World Happiness Summit. And yeah, I completely agree with you, Karen. I think there's a massive need for systemic change. I think my shift is always on the individual responsibility, because I don't think systemic change happens without individual change. And I think often what happens is the system says people need to change, and people say the system needs to change, and then no one changes. And you can kind of do that for a long time, where everyone's shifting the blame or pointing the finger. And my perspective in life is, well, if we change individuals, if individuals choose to change, they will go into the system and find new ways to change the system. But trying to change the system without self-change isn't sustainable. And so my recommendation is that, yes, we want people in the system to try and change the system, and we want people to try and change the system, but that all starts with people changing themselves. And I really believe that the more conscious, happy, aware individuals we have that go and become leaders and go and become CEOs and go and become prime ministers and presidents, that's what we need. But that starts with people being conscious leaders themselves first before we go and try and change the system. Because again, you can try and change the system, but you need to put people into the system. And if people don't have those values, then again, the system's in the same place again. So that would be some of my thoughts on that specifically. And
can I just add to that? I mean, I completely agree with that.
I'd love to hear you.
But you mentioned expertise, which applies, of course, to people at every level of society. And I think the biggest systemic change that's needed is to equip people who don't go to university with a real expertise and a real skill, so that they have the satisfaction of really contributing to their very best, to meaningful contribution to society. That's the expertise bit.
I agree. I completely agree.
Thank you both. Sort of another institutional sort of need for change is obviously our organizations that people find themselves in workplaces. We've had another question here from someone who's just given their initials, CFVC. How can we keep calm when other people, co-workers, are stressing us out? There's a lot of toxicity, stress, tension, challenges in our working lives, Jay. What can we do to perhaps keep more of this and bring more of this sense of happiness and purpose into our working lives?
I think one of the first things is that if you're creating a very supportive environment for yourself in the environment that you control, which is your daily habits, your daily routines, then you already have a protective armor and shield around you when you go into the workplace. And what I find for a lot of people is that if we don't have our protective shield and armor on, and then we go out into the workplace and then we deal with more negativity and toxicity. So again, it really starts with having your practices and habits. And that's why when I mentioned TIME, those are great places to start, because once you have that, you'll feel stronger, you'll feel more protected, you'll feel more happy already. So when you walk into that toxic environment, you can just deal with it a little better. The second thing I'd say is that it's really important that you speak to people in the organization about how they can choose to improve that environment too. And that's part of the systemic change. So I think recommending to senior people in the organization of well-being initiatives or ideas for how the team can have better bonding sessions, or the team can meditate together, or the team can do more team building activities. I think leadership is really important inside corporate organizations. And sometimes they're so busy that they don't even know if they have the time to do these things. And so sometimes if you can lead on those initiatives, that can be such a big thing. So I know in companies when I used to work, I'd always say to my bosses, I'd be like, well, I'm happy to lead a meditation, or I'm happy to try and do a self-development session, or I'm happy to try and facilitate an offsite or an away day where everyone can have a better sense of well-being and stress management. So you can come up with ideas, and even if you can't teach yourself, you can try and facilitate that. And the third and final thing I'd say is that it's important in your workplace to create those environments through sight, sense, and sounds, as I said before, whether it's music you listen to on your own, whether it's a diffuser that you have at your table and a candle that calms you down. So you have your practices that when people say things that trigger you, when people say things that affect you, you know that you've got your breathing practices, you've got the things around you that can bring you back to feeling aligned. And that's what it's really about. It's really not about changing people. It's really not about hoping that everyone's going to change tomorrow. That's not realistic. What's really important is that you know what you're going to do about how you feel when you feel it.
Well said. And on that subject of workplaces, Richard, I know you've talked extensively before about the need to move away from a sort of macho culture in our organizations towards a more compassionate, caring, which I think is very much reflected by what Jay said there as well.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Team building, giving the members of the team more of a say in how the work is organized, and so that it fits in with their work-life balance, but also, of course, with feeling that the team is working effectively and is achieving its objectives because everybody's able to make their own contribution most effectively. I think that's really crucial. And as Mark said, to get away from horrible within team competitions between different players of the kind which is really so much encouraged by systems of reward based on individual performance, pay for people who are actually meant to be working as colleagues in a team.
Jay, we've had a series of very moving conversations in these webinars with people like Mo Godat and Maria Siwa recently, both who have personal experience of loss and losing loved ones. And we've talked a lot about, I guess, this idea of grief. And I want to come back to it again because Bob's asked a question. And I think there are a lot of people dealing with grief of different types in this COVID situation, whether it's loss of work or it's loss of loved ones in particular, you know, happening to millions around the world. Bob's just asked simply, how can I find happiness and peace after grief?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Bob. So I too have lost during this time a fair few people. We lost 4 family friends to COVID, all older and closer to my parents. And so that was tough. I also lost one of my long-term mentors at this time. He passed away from stage 4 brain cancer, not COVID during this time. But I couldn't go back to London to be at his funeral because I couldn't travel, so I couldn't be there. And so I can definitely empathize with anyone who's lost someone or lost something. The first thing is to not belittle anyone's pain and not devalue yours. So if you're upset that you lost your job and someone's upset that they lost someone, you might think that your loss is less important or less valuable. And that's not true. Your loss is your loss. So you have to assess what your loss means to you, not how it compares to anyone else's loss. And I think we compare our losses a lot. And in that way, we either devalue someone else's loss or we devalue our own. And I think it's really important that you value your loss and you appreciate it and you accept it and acknowledge it. The second thing I'd say is that when you're dealing with a loss, you're not really looking for happiness or peace. And this is one of the reasons why I believe in the use of the word meaning. I believe in tough times, you can't find happiness, but you have to look for meaning. And meaning is, how does this change how I'm going to live? Because that's how you really honor someone you've lost, is you change how you live because of something they did or they didn't do. So if you know, so I know, for example, my spiritual mentor who passed away from stage 4 brain cancer, I know that he'd be happy if I tried to live my life in a way of service. And I know he'd be unhappy with me if I chose not to. And so that's where I find meaning in his loss, that I'm still living with him and I still feel his presence because I'm trying to live with a quality or a value that he really lived through and espoused. And so we have to find meaning at tough times. So that's the second thing I'd say, is don't look for happiness. Look for meaning, and meaning will give you a sense of peace. And the third thing is, we have a lot of feelings that we have to process and we have to live through them. A lot of the time we try to, in the beginning, it's fine, it's normal, but long term, we can't distract. We try and do 3 things with tough feelings: distract from them by watching a show or something, avoid them by just never having to talk about them. We try to numb ourselves through sometimes drugs and alcohol and other substances. And when you're trying to do any of those things, you never really deal with the actual pain. And so my assessment would be that when you feel ready, when you're okay, sit with someone that you love, a therapist, a coach, a guide, someone in your local community, whoever you trust, and allow yourself to feel what you're feeling. Allow yourself to journal, allow yourself to write them out. And don't avoid these feelings, because those feelings are useful. They're signals, they have meaning in them. Feelings have meaning, and sometimes we make them meaningless by trying to distract ourselves, avoid them, or numb ourselves from them.
That's very profound, Jay, and I'm so sorry for your loss, as we are for everyone who's lost people in this time. It's been a real challenge. So thank you so much for sharing that in such an open way. On a slightly more sort of day-to-day and perhaps playful level, we heard a bit about your morning recommendations around sight and sound and so on. Harry's asked, could Jay elaborate on his evening routine? What do you do at the end of the day to help yourself find a bit of peace and purpose as you drop off to sleep?
That's a great question. So one of the best things I'd say is make sure that you are eating, a few hours before you sleep. And that may sound like a weird one, because you're thinking, well, how does that apply? It does, because after you eat, your body's trying to digest what you're eating. So if you eat at 9 and go to sleep at 10, your body's still digesting, which means you're not going to get a peaceful sleep. It means you're not going to be in a relaxed state, and you're most likely to feel quite agitated and feel like you're in a shallow sleep. So if you sleep at 10, eat at 7. If you sleep at 11, eat at 8. If you give it a few hours, that's a really important thing. The second thing applies to social media and technology. I think it's really important to get a real alarm clock if you need one, and not have your phone be your alarm, because I think your phone creates a natural addiction in the morning to look at it. And it's so much easier to wake up to a normal alarm clock. And so trying not to use your phone at night, I would say, again, a couple of hours before you sleep, or at least an hour before you sleep. So if you sleep at 11, stop looking at your phone at 10. And that's really, really a powerful way to do an evening routine. The third thing I love in the evening routine is I always try and write to myself, you know, what did I do today that made me feel great? Like, what did I do today that made me feel really happy? Because I think we miss those moments. See, when we're sad, we complain for a month. And when we're happy, we just go, oh, great, I'm happy. And we just let it go. And so we can remember negative memories more strongly than positive ones because we don't really celebrate our wins in a deep way. And I don't mean you need to have a party for 7 days in a row. But what I do mean is it's so important every day to write down, what am I doing that makes me happy? What am I doing that makes me grateful? And that way you're just reminding yourself to do those things. And the final thing is I always say some affirmations to myself before I go to sleep, where I'll say, you know, I will wake up energized, happy and enthusiastic. I'll wake up healthy, happy and full of energy. And that I see as a way of programming your mind for the next morning when you wake up. So those are some evening routine ideas.
Great tips, Jay. Thank you so much. I've got one sort of final closing question, which links back into a conversation Richard had before. But before we go on to that, I just wanted to pick on one of the lovely comments we've been seeing streaming throughout this session. I'm so grateful for everyone who's contributing. Rebecca's made just a beautiful point. She says, sending love, compassion, sympathy to all of you here, including myself, who are going through grief and loss. It comes in different ways. And for those of us who have no one, mental health and emotional support lines such as Samaritans and the charity Sane and many more are available. So thank you, Rebecca, for reminding us that even if we don't have anyone to turn to immediately in our own lives, there are others, there are ways to seek help. And of course, everyone who's struggling right now should be really encouraged to do so. So let me come on to this lovely question from Judy, who refers back to a conversation that Richard had with Marty Seligman when he was with us, Jay, talking about positive psychology and a lot more. She says, I've thought so much about Richard's final words in his chat with Marty, which were that the ultimate secret for happiness is to connect with the deepest and best part of yourself. There is a God within that you have to find. Richard, that was the sort of words you used, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Judy just said, could you ask both Richard and Jay to expand a bit on that? What is the God within? How do you find that, you know, personally? And Jay, I'd love to hear your perspective. And then Richard, maybe you can reflect on what that's meant for you, seeing as you raised it originally.
Yeah, absolutely. So from my studies and my understanding, there is a spiritual spark within us all, which is part and parcel of the divine energy, source, God, whatever you like to call it. And that's the part of ourselves that is already eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. And it's covered over by what we've learned in the material world and what we've learned since we've been born. And so we're almost wearing masks and covered in layers of dirt from our true selves. And so when you cleanse that dirt, when you purify, when you push away all of those layers and levels of false understanding, you come to this part of you that is already full of knowledge, full of bliss and eternal and full of joy. But the process of getting there is not learning anything new. The process of getting there is removing the false identities and identifications that we have. So it happens through a process of self-reflection and awareness. It happens through a process of being really aware of who we're becoming and what we want to be. And it comes from really identifying what are the qualities of that soul, of that spiritual spark, and trying to live and imbibe those qualities, recognizing that that is the real us. It's just been buried away for so long. So it's almost like we've been acting and playing a role that we are not. And we're almost trying to unlearn the role and be ourselves again. So that's my understanding of that statement and that you shared, Mark, and it's a beautiful statement.
Yes, I mean, I think of it a teeny bit in terms of the wonderful story that you referred to in your book of the Cherokee grandfather talking to his grandson and saying to the grandson that there are two parts of you. We each have two parts. We have a good part and we have a bad part. He calls them the good wolf and the bad wolf, and they're fighting inside you. This is the way the story goes. And the child says, well, which of them is going to win? And the grandfather says, well, the one that wins will be the one that you feed. So we have to identify ourselves with the good part of ourselves. Just don't pretend there isn't the other part, but lay it on one side. Connect with the good part of yourself, and you will be fine, whatever happens.
Love that.
So we're running out of time, Jay, and we're incredibly grateful for you sparing this time. Right back at the start of this webinar, Pam posted a request, which I wanted to come back to. She said, big favour for the end of the webinar. My big sister Wendy is on the webinar tonight. Please can you tell her her little sister Pamela loves her very much and pass on my good wishes. Thank you, Jay. So Wendy was wanting to connect with, or Pamela was wanting to connect with Wendy. So I'm sure
Love that.
will be mentioned. Jay, it's been a real pleasure to spend time with you, and thank you for sharing all your wisdom in so many different ways online and this evening. There was a request to say, could you post that music again? I'm not sure if that managed to go through in the end, but if that hadn't been posted, there were people asking for a link to it, or if you send it to us, we can circulate it. So everyone who's on the event this evening, we'll send around a video from this event, we'll send around links to Jay's great book and other places you can stay in touch with his work. And of course, hopefully most of you are aware if you're in the Action for Happiness community, but you know that we have an amazing array of resources you can use as well, all freely available to try and create a happier and kinder world. We're in the middle of our altruistic August campaign promoting kindness at the moment. We're moving into self-care September soon to look at the kindness to ourselves as well as to each other. All a great reflection, I think, of the peace and purpose we've heard about this evening. Jay, did you have any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with before we wrap up for this evening?
No, yeah, thank you so much. I want to say thank you to Richard and thank you to Mark and thank you to Action for Happiness for hosting such a wonderful, wonderful session. And my wish for all of you and my prayer and meditation for all of you is that you realize that everything that you're seeking, everything that you're really looking for and yearning for, it does exist and it's inside of you, and that you continue to take steps towards that as opposed to steps away. And I wish you all the best to stay safe, healthy, and happy during this time. And like I said, keep looking for the meaning in the tough situations, even if you can't always be happy. That's not the goal. So all the best, and a big thank you again to Mark and Richard for having me. And yeah, really grateful to have spent this time together.
Can I, if I could just say, this has been so short.
It went fast. It went really fast.
This is the tip of the iceberg. I want to say to everybody that please get hold of the iceberg. This is the iceberg. And there's such wisdom in here. And, you know, there's such time needed to really absorb it all. I mean, I've spent a lot of time reading this book. It's really deep. And thank you for sharing with us, really, Jay. Really.
Thank you, Richard. It's very kind of you. And thank you, Mark. I appreciate both of you and what you're doing. And thank you to the whole Action for Happiness community. And thanks to each and every one of you who showed up. Can't do this without you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening, rest of your day, wherever you are. Stay safe, stay happy. See you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.